I think that by spending the first 18 years of my life in Zambia, and then since having travelled a lot, I've become very aware that if you are very open to people, there's a real depth of connection, no matter where they are, and even if they don't share your language. I've worked in many different countries, and pieces that come to mind in terms of language was working with a group of Kurdish women. And I was totally astounded at doing this piece of work in which we all felt so at one with each other. And also I initiated this group called Elles, which were women from Israel, from Croatia, from Iraq, from Northern Ireland. And we worked in each other's countries. And recently I've been working with artists from Zambia again, and it's been great just to reconnect to that sense of a very intimate mindset I remember from my childhood. And I've just reconnected with this artist called Sarah Chibomwe, both of us working from our 8-year-old selves. Performance is really central to my work. The dilemma for me is actually how to capture the vitality and the spark that you feel in performance. And I can really identify with that belief system that says the camera steals one's soul, because often looking at photographs after a performance, I thought, gosh, they look so bland and lifeless, and they don't seem to have anything to do with what I felt was going on in the performance. So for several years, I did not want any documentation of my work to happen. I rather liked the idea of the ephemerality of the morphine through people's brains, through the encoding systems of electrochemical processes, of that morphine, and the fluidity seemed to me much more real to how performance should be perceived. But then I also started to think of ways in which I could incorporate photography into the work itself, so that the photography became part of the fluidity. So for instance, at Modern Art Oxford, I did work which was at the end of an exhibition of my photographs, which I'd had specifically printed in water-based inks. And the performance, basically, I had a bucket and a sponge, and I just washed the surfaces of the photographs so that the inks just dripped down the wall. And slowly they disintegrated and become fluid and very painterly. And finally they were left as completely empty frames with all these drippings all around them. So that was one way. Another piece I did using photography was in 2019, a work called Closer, which was looking at a 40-year period. I'd first done this piece in 1979, which was basically swinging my head continuously, uttering these incantations. And I wanted to use that swinging process in the photographs themselves. Well, I've done many confrontational works, particularly early on, looking at that idea of the gaze and trying to make it confusing or absurd or ridiculous. So, for instance, I used to walk down the street with a rubber hand clutching my breast or my groin, so that people looking aren't quite sure, you know, what is this indicating? And then in photography, I also wanted to do that confusing idea of something that does look fetishistic, but doesn't quite fit, so that there's an unease, something unsettling about the image. But I think now with re-looking at gender fluidities, a whole different set of consciousness about who we are in terms of sexuality and gender, makes that whole gaze much, much more nuanced. And I think now the inward gaze is what is really happening, and the selfie and this new heterotopian space of the mirror has been taken over by the selfie. I think that Susan Sontag was really prescient in the 70s, saying that the camera makes everyone a tourist in others' reality and eventually in one's own. That whole sense of othering ourselves. When I was asked why I was an artist, I wrote on my body because you can answer yes or no to the same question. And in a way, I feel a little bit like that about feminism, only because I've had very, very different feelings over the last 50 years. When I came from South Africa, I'd done a year at university, the height of apartheid. I was so aware of categorization, separating people. So coming to Britain and the whole women's lib thing and everything again felt like separate categories. And I just didn't want to use labels. I always felt that labels are what makes different tribes, different camps, and people's aggression seems to be heightened in these different spaces. But now I feel much more identified as a feminist. I'm very aware of the incredible work that so many women have done, and I've really wanted to honour and celebrate that in a series of fromages. I call them fromages that I've done. Well, in the late 60s, Yoko Ono was definitely a huge liberating force. Her whole notion of imagination as a revolutionary act was really meaningful to me. You know, things like draw a map to get lost, or steal all the clocks and watches in the world and destroy them, or watch the sunset and feel the earth move. Things like that transcended time and space for me and really made it so possible for art to be able to be limitless. The artist now who I find really inspirational is a Zambian artist called Agnes Yomwe, who in COVID times approached the local chief to get some land to galvanize the local population because COVID was destroying the entire livelihoods. And with real guts and passion and vision, she started this enterprise called the Creators Village, which I'm really thrilled to be a small part of.